What made your worst job ever your worst job ever? Power tripping, micromanaging, unsupportive boss. Everything I did was wrong according to her, but she had to keep me on because there was nobody else who could do the job. My first job after living in Eastern Europe. I didn't know the labor laws in Canada when I was 15 and signed up for $25 a day to work at a summer camp. I lived there for 2 months, up at 6 a.m. to help with breakfast and working until 10 p.m. to clean up after everybody had gone to bed, and was given 3 meals a day. They gave me a day off every 2 weeks, and by a day I mean 24 hours. I was off at noon one day and had to be back at noon the next. We were too far in the boonies to go anywhere in that short a time. At the end of the summer, they told me they wanted to give half my paycheck to one of the volunteers because it was the Christian thing to do. I was cornered 20 minutes before I left and pressured into agreeing. When I finally caved, they'd given me the check that was already made out for the lesser amount. Somehow the check they gave me was only for $450. They said they were deducting the food expenses. This was a Christian summer camp for the severely mentally and physically disabled. I was bathing and changing the diapers of fully grown, severely disabled adults. On some days, they told me to give medicine and food to a guy who was tube-fed and change catheters for another guy. I don't think you can even do that before you're 18 and have some sort of certification. They never gave me a copy of the contract, so I had nothing to pursue them with. The camp should be shut down, IMO. McDonald's! They wouldn't really train you properly, but they would get mad at you for not knowing how to do things. One of the managers was also the type who would yell at crew members. She was rude to both crew members and customers. I just quit from there. They would tell me, go do X, and I'd be like, well, how do I do X? And they'd be like, you haven't been trained how to do X? I haven't been trained how to do anything. First real job after college. Boss was always giving contradictory requests, then being extremely mad when things didn't go well. He also liked to give indications that went against good industry practices. Also, the whole speech, ask me if you have any doubts. Then when asked, he'd send me to someone else, forcing me to keep an explicit schedule for the projects I'm working on, then being mad that I'm sticking to that schedule. The best moment was when we were so close to winning a huge contract, but there was a somewhat serious problem in our proposal. I went to him, and he was basically, that's your problem, you deal with it, and left for the weekend. I had been there a few months and it was his company. I had no idea how to fix that with the resources I had. I'm still convinced that he could have fixed it in a couple of hours tops after a few phone calls, since he is a far better connected guy than me. But nope, just watch that ton of money and reputation go away because you're an idiot. Sounds like my job. I told you not to do that. You told me several conflicting things. That was one of them, yes? I told you to call me if you had questions. You told me you were busy and hung up when I called you with my questions, etc., etc. Boredom. I had a job that literally required me to do nothing for 90% of the day. Absolutely brutal beyond belief. Funny, most people say they would welcome a cushy job until they experience it. It does suck. Seems so chill, but too much chilling and you'll freeze. The ideal job has you engaged and challenged throughout the day, with a reasonable cut-off point to end the workday. 2.5-hour commute, so 5 hours commuting each day, and it was so fast-paced that we never had a minute to rest, and we get yelled at if we needed to go to the bathroom. Wow, how long did you stay? That girl Shirley. This was the job I had between undergrad and grad school. I was only there for about 6 months. She was a complainer. There was no subject and no situation in which Shirley could not complain. People, weather, what was in the vending machines, it didn't matter because Shirley would find a way to bitch about it. She also had a hobby of suing people. I know roughly the area she lives in, and every once in a while, I'll Google her name just to see if she's still as insufferable as she used to be, and the answer is yes. Ah, so my family has been masquerading as a woman named Shirley. Everyone there was a Scientologist. They have their own Scientology business model. It was a doctor's practice large. I had nightmares about them breaking into my house and auditing me. They didn't have soap in any of the bathrooms. I was told to bring my own as there was no budget. Manager was also using the company as a front for selling stolen goods from out of the country. Co-workers confirmed all this. I lasted 1.5 days. Did they ever get busted? Not sure. They are still open, so most likely not. Health code violations and illegal activity would probably have shut them down permanently if they get caught. I worked directly with someone who was an evil bully psycho. If she decided you were her target for the day, it was almost unbearable. I had discussed it with management a couple of times because she liked to zero in on one of the sweeter, innocent girls and make her cry. She made the other girls cry too, but liked to pick on Jen because she was an easy target. Nothing was ever done. Then came my turn to be the target. She decided I did drugs and started making loud comments about my habit. She would stop our coworkers in mid-task and tell them that if they needed drugs, to come see me. She would say it loud enough for the clientele to hear. I asked her to stop and she laughed in my face. I was furious and demanded that management address her actions, explaining that such a small crew couldn't function if half the workers were in hysterics because of one person. They told me it wasn't their problem. I quit. She is still terrorizing the staff. They've asked me to come back 3 times, each time with a higher offer. I'll never again. Wonder what made her so special that they kept her. 50°C temperatures for 8 hours at a time. It was a small coffee shop with greenhouse windows, 6 freezers, and chiller cabinets. No external heat sink, so they chilled the food but dumped the heat into the shop. 4 panini grills and a large espresso machine. I wasn't allowed to turn the music down even at customer request because we are a music and coffee shop. That's our thing. It should be loud enough that you can't have a conversation without raising your voice. The single most common request we had was for a bacon roll. We had rolls, we had bacon, but I wasn't allowed to make them because we're premium, and bacon rolls aren't premium. The company was entirely based on opening new shops with investors' money so they could show growth to the next set of investors. My outlet certainly didn't make money. They went bankrupt a year after I left. The customer is always right. Example is all over this. Terrible business people if they can figure out that bacon rolls should have been their thing. Toss-up. Retail and it was the customers, ours, poor pay and manager. Warehouse order pulling. Dull, mindlessly repetitive mandatory overtime of 2 hours every day plus weekends. You've had the same work history that I did. Retail shows you just how self-centered people can be, and the warehouse pulling is just soul-deadening. I never minded the warehouse pulling. I did it for a few summers and it was hot and boring but good hours. Lots of money and nice people. The moment I realized that my old job was my worst job ever was when I opened an email chain by accident between a receptionist and other employees, and it was them talking smack about me and how I'm probably not that injured after I had been in a car accident. Catty office women are the worst. There were so many bad things. The bosses that knew nothing of a day-to-day working with the mentally disabled adults. And spit, piss, and behavior screaming for 16 hours. Getting a concussion from getting hit repeatedly on the head during a behavior. Honestly, there wasn't much good about that job. I worked there for 7 years because I wanted to make a difference in these adults' lives. However, after year 4, it was just a job and I hated it. But I had all the overtime I wanted and we needed the money really, really badly. We may know one another. My boss's temperament. Very successful interior designer I was project managing for. When she was cool, she was the coolest. When she sucked, she was a damn Dyson. She would throw tantrums, slamming windows, throwing desk objects, screaming, making insane and useless demands like, I want to know how much we've spent on coffee for the last 3 years. Worse, according to her, no one is ever competent at their jobs. Whether it's $1 million, builder, or her own staff, she was always the only person who knew what she was doing. No one stayed longer than a year. Is your boss my housemate? I'm having to deal with a similar person from someone I live with, except she loses her that about not having the right kind of pasta to make for dinner, or someone asking her to wash her hands after she moisturizes her face, so she stops making everything in the house slimy. Tiny things like that. 10 out of 10, least favorite type of person. Management. The lower workers can manage schedules better than management themselves. A bad schedule can make the whole day hell, and for it to repeat constantly can be tiring and demotivated the hell out of you and every other worker. Yes, I can do any schedule for a day, a week even, but when it continues day after day, you have no reserve and just can't continue. Went for the interview, seemed nice enough. Small business with only 5 to 6 other guys. Well, figured out real quick why I was the youngest guy they got in a while. Toxic boss whose sole purpose of existence was the company. The other guy had all been there for 20 years, so they were toxic know-it-alls that took every chance to exercise their seniority. Was hired for the day shift. Got put on nights soon after I started. Boss expected me to show up an hour early and then stay until the truck was loaded for the next day, which could literally have been whenever. Have 2 young kids at home, so I said I should be put on days since that's what I agreed to when I was hired. Boss said that's not what he said and moved my hours back even later. Grabbed my stuff and walked out that minute from that place. Have anxiety, depression left over from the army, and this place seriously made me miserable. Current job is the polar opposite. Took a $4 an hour pay cut, but damned is it ever worth it. I work to live, not live to work. Work-life balance is everything to me, so I can see my kids more. More money isn't worth it if you're seriously considering swerving off a bridge on your way to work every day, people. I'm about to be out of the Air Force. I've had a beautiful tree along my route to work, picked out for months. It looks less appetizing the closer I get to my final out. Haven't found a job yet, so no clue what I'm gonna do, but I know I'll be happier and it'll work out. Job? Waitress. Reason? My boss. I worked in a pub restaurant owned by a married couple. Both were ex-RAF, and the wife was a trained chef. She was one of the most awful people I've ever met. She bullied me for having a learning difficulty and would frequently cuss at the staff, get drunk on the job, and throw things at us. She was only ever nice if you had a spare cigarette for her. The worst part was that she was quite a well-known figure in our community, so no one believed me when I talked about how horrible she was. I believe you. My brother and I would do flooring occasionally a while back. It was pretty good pay, but one job in particular was terrible. We had to rip up this carpet and put linoleum down instead. Easy enough, right? Except in one corner of the room, the baseboards were soaked through and rotting because of cat piss, and some other linoleum continued over the kitchen under the carpet. Whoever put down that linoleum put way too much glue, so we spent a solid 5 hours kneeling in cat piss and chipping away at this linoleum. It was so gross. Sounds horrid. Were the owners some kind of hoarders? The owner wasn't a hoarder, just a slob, who also happens to be my sister, and expected the work to be done for free. My mother paid us. Call center work. People are orders of magnitude more likely to verbally assault you over the phone than in person. And at the time, my social anxiety and depression were undiagnosed and untreated. I eventually had a nervous breakdown and quit. I found the structure of a call center way worse than the people over the phone. The metrics, the tiny box you have to fit in with the tools you are given, the fact you don't get to collect yourself between calls on a busy day, and that they ping in randomly when it isn't a busy day. Seriously, a switchboard and removing middle management would have made it 1,000 times better. Worst job? Military. Why? The people. I know I'll get some hate for this, but I'm convinced that the average IQ of the military is about 15 points below that of the general population. Christ! Being surrounded by idiots was a miserable existence. Not to say there aren't some sharp dudes in the military. There are, but oh my god, the per capita number of idiots is through the roof. Medical office. Doctor's wife ran it. On the first day, she ranted about how clicks were forbidden in the office. Made me listen to her handling her ex-husband over the phone as an example of her management style. Oh, and hidden cameras and microphones everywhere. We couldn't prove it, but it was so likely. Her paranoia ramped up as she brought in her bestie who hated me on sight, then brought in the best ass-kisser I have ever seen. The 3 of them formed a clique. I left 2 months later. I just quit without another job waiting because it devolved into daily abuse and yelling. Also used in a medical office where the physician's wife ran the facility. Some red flags were some of the stories I heard. Doctor would watch the place from home via his security camera and call in when a patient came into the building and left. Also, we hired and fired 2 HR and 3 to 4 managers in 3 months. The wife was the HR manager too, no training of course. My current job by far. I'm a rant now. My boss is the kind to write up for everything. even for things he told me to do. I work security. There are 4 of us that share the same office, but due to shifts, there is only one of us working at a time. Office policy says morning shifts take out the trash, since the dumpster is far enough away to need a vehicle to get to. Said vehicle gets taken for other use after my shift, so I have to take out every morning without fail. Well, after taking out empty bags due to no one throwing anything anyway, Lead said to use my judgment and try not to waste supplies. What does he do? Write me up because I didn't take out a bag with 2 water and an empty toilet paper roll? Can't fight it when he denies what he said. I have received 6 write-ups like this in the last year that he had been led. The only way to fight back against this stuff is to send emails and hope to get all responses typed out, so you can point to specific instructions that can be proven to be your supervisor. Obviously, this will piss off your boss who is mistreating you, and they will likely just find new ways to make your life miserable, but it's the only way to combat this thing.